for you to have a sustainable operation, not just to meet the startup deadline. When I sit here and talk, it's not just to meet the startup deadline, for the sake of Nigerians clapping. And then a few months after, we're back to square one.
We might be doing another tab.
Correct. I'm looking at what do we need to fix across the entire value chain so that when we start up for once, we're assured that this is going to hit the ground running and in a sustainable way and in a way that creates value for all stakeholders involved.
I'm hearing something from your analysis, which for me is important to this conversation, and that is the supply obligation.
Correct.
Which some of those companies are duty bound to oblige to. Now, do we have a problem with the quantity? Because I'm hearing issues with refineries not getting adequate supplies. Is it that we're running out of crude or something? Is the soil drying up? Is there no crude anymore?
No, we're not running out of crude. Well, let me tell you what happens, right? You find out. Let's just take a review of what has just happened in the last few months. The president needed some dollars, and he has put on offer some of our futures volume, what we call future volume, on the table, and said, if anyone can raise us this amount, this is how we're going to offset that payment. And that was done through the NNPC, trying to raise 5 billion. Now, government after government have done the same thing. So what that means, every time a government comes, the government says, oh, I tell you what, take some, give us some money, and then you can take some volume. So what that means is that in the first part, some of our volumes is actually already, committed forward. Okay. Then we have the crude oil theft issue that, in some sense, has actively stopped some sort of investments because some fields have been abandoned because they're susceptible to attack. And so investors have, whether local or international, have left those fields, right? Then we also have the production, kind of drop in production. And it's very clear why. A lot of the fields that we are actively producing today were explored, right? The exploration phase was done, say, in the late 60s, right? We're not having that concerted effort towards exploring more and more and more, because perhaps we would have found other fields and then we'll get to develop those fields. So a lot of the fields, and I think it's a very good time to explain the marginal field concept. When we say marginal field, it's simply a field that was explored, and then they had designed the well, constructed the well, but either they had taken out some oil to a certain degree. When I say they, I'm actually talking about the IOCs. They had taken out some oil and they felt, well, the remaining volumes are not profitable based on getting a trade-off between our OPEX, our operating expenses to get this oil out, and of course the profit on the stuff. So they would say, okay, this is a field that we want to be included in the bid round, and that would go. Then there's another set of fields, which is still marginal field, that had been drilled, capped, they intended to produce, but perhaps at the time the economic fundamentals around the well, perhaps it needed some pressure enhancement to be able to take the oil, and that cost, they felt, okay, we're not going to do it, but it's part of the block of license that they do renew year in, year out. And then after a while, they felt, okay, let's give it up. Now, what we keep here is marginal fields. And those are fields, either ways, from both explanations that I've made, are fields that have been explored, and we've proven that we have volumes, whether it's volumes that can go on natural drive, reservoir drive, or the volumes that we need to be able to do some enhancements to get them out. But there are there. The question is, what happens to the fields that that have not been explored? We have a lot of them. We have proven volumes that are really huge. What happens to those fields? That's the next one. Then we have other factors that has to do with the fact that the volumes that we have, as I said, primarily a lot of people have done their their analysis and their design and marked those volumes for the export market. That's what we need to understand.
So it's more about the export market now, such that we do not have enough crude to supply the local refineries?
Absolutely, because the original design of our petroleum system was to collect economic rent. It was comfortable. You just get the oil to the right spec, minimum spec required,
For export.
and then for export, which is, just get it.
So it therefore, sorry to cut you short, it therefore means that there was a design flaw from the onset, right? The contractual agreement with the IOCs that we had come on board did not capture in-country refining, as you said. It was more about taking this oil, fit enough for export, and getting economic rent.
Yes, I mean, in some way, there was that, but I wouldn't say it was really a conscious design flaw, right? It was more like a design flaw that
we didn't know
existed. But as I said, it was comfortable. This was, the time where we had to remember, when we start producing oil, when we started producing oil as a country, our production cost was actually low. What that meant is that the differential between the production, the selling price and the production cost meant we had a lot of allowance to do whatever we wanted. It was something that we could play around, right? And the terrain was very forgiving. But as your assets get more mature, then you start having very high operating costs. That weighs in, and the fact that, okay, over time, corruption has become very endemic, so inflation of contracts, that has now caused a very huge burden on our production costs. And so the margins are lesser. So the thing is this, when we could have made any difference, we were addicted to the quick money. And now that the quick money is gone, we've now found ourselves in a situation where we're helpless. And this is the challenge right now. Starting from the petroleum, the oil value chain down to the midstream and to the gas, all of it, we just had petroleum, crude. And the crude was just exploration and production, right? We don't have a strategic storage. When we're talking about the midstream, we just have basic expand of pipelines. It's not enough, because by right, the issue of having truck logistics should have not been the deciding factor in our petroleum value chain. We should have been having things like, we're pumping, say we have, say a refinery in Akwa Ibom and we want to pump all the way to Kaduna. That conversation should be what we should be having.
We shouldn't be using the trucks then.
So now, just recently, I think it was in 2020, we started having this conversation around the Nigerian Gas Transportation Network Code, which is simply the governing code that creates that midstream sector. The midstream is all about transportation. So before now, the government built the pipeline. So what the government has tried to do with the code is to say, okay, can we get a framework in place that would allow people come in and build a pipeline and get tariff? So he's trying to flesh out the midstream, and of course being empowered by the Petroleum Industry Act. So the thing is, we're just playing catch up, but predominantly a lot of our setting was actually for economic rents, exporting and getting economic rent. Now back to what I'm saying, we're going to have to, and this is where the lawyers will talk about lacunas, right? We're going to have to address a lot of those issues, a lot of interface issues. So, for example, the government has come to say we need to start meeting the domestic supply obligations as a minimum before you can get your license. Now, a lot of IOCs are going to say, well, we have these domestic supply obligations, but the volumes that was that was based on the volumes that we were expecting. We're not getting that much volumes. What do we do? So these are things, I mean, when I talk, I'm looking with the benefit of hindsight to say, what can we do to address, kind of a what if analysis? What if this happens? How do we address it? Because I know those are going to come to bear. We're going to have pricing conversation. We're going to have sustainability of volumes. We're going to have issues around what if they had earmarked those volumes already, allotted it to the export market based on a long-term sale? There are two types of sale. There's a spot sale and there's long-term sales. Long-term sales is where I come to you and say, well, I want to build perhaps this facility, but do you know what? If you can give me support and funding, this is my monetization strategy. I intend to sell XYZ volumes over, say, 15 years, and this is the basis for which I've come to you for this funding. And because a lot of those IOCs have, they're listed on the International Stock Exchange, they try to keep to their word. So how are you going to work around such areas of potential conflict? That's the conversation before you can then come out and make several instructive statements about the direction things should go. Those directional statements are not in itself enough to change the situation.
Whose responsibility is it to guide the government, especially when it comes to this policy area of this quagmire?
I'd like to give credit to the ministers that have come on board, both the Minister for Gas and the Minister for Oil. I think, they should be having this conversation with their technical team as a minimum. And the technical team, I'd like to charge them that, this is the time where you show that patriotism as a Nigerian. Fine, there are a number of opportunities. You want to make money for yourself, but be Nigerian first. Tell the truth, guide the ministers, because I'm not also disputing the fact that the ministers may not be in a position to have a full picture.
Of what's really going on.
Correct. They are there to sort of come in there with that management overview, oversight, right? The guys that have been in the industry should be telling them the truth. This is where you need to be looking. These are potential hiccup areas, because it sort of present embarrassing situation to us after making several statements. You've heard several things like CBN come out and say, we're going to clear the USD backlog. We're going to crash the market with, for speculators. But then the question is, at what point do we go from talking the talk to walking the talk? That's my question. And I'm sitting here to give those ideas because I feel, if anyone is listening, these are the things we need to do. This is not just a time to make an instructive statement. This is a time to have a what-if analysis, get some experts into the room, ask tough questions, and ask yourself, if we do this and this happens, how do we respond? Because they're going to happen. There's no way you can tell me that you can go through the macroeconomic, terrain without having, some kind of hiccups that you never expected. What gets you ready is when you've done your risk assessment and you have a risk response plan to that risk assessment.
I like the analogy you've given, which takes me to my next question, the deadline. The president has given a promise. Now, it's going to weigh a lot on the president at this point, because he's going to want to, as one who's just coming into office, is going to want to make sure that that promise comes to pass. Because if you remember, the last administration did promise that they'll have 4 refineries working, and all through the administration, none worked. Now, President Tinubu is going to want to be different from that to make sure that if he says December, we have the Port Harcourt refinery working in December. Now, let's look at the advantage of having the deadline met in December. What impact will it have if we have the Port Harcourt refinery operational by December? What's in it for us?
Okay, let me be very conservative when I give my views, because I don't want to. I want to be more realistic than optimistic, right? The first impact we're going to have is we're going to have security of supply, and if you've been in this country, during the festive period, you would tell that there's always a shortage of supply. So
artificial most times.
Well, artificial most times, but at the barest minimum, we're going to have that assurance of supply. That's the first part. The second part, if we're able to get the economic fundamentals right around the supply situation and all that, we should be able to, at the minimum, influence the pricing in the regional areas. So the Port Harcourt, Akwa Ibom, and the South by extension, that's what I mean. And the reason is this. So we already have trucks that are feeding between Port Harcourt and Akwa Ibom. We do have that. So that's why I mentioned Akwa Ibom. So it will not be easy difficult for us to benefit through the existing network, benefit from that having that supply. We'll just have off-takers go and sign off-take agreements with the refinery. So I think it's going to help. And then, of course, that would cascade down to, the charge of transportation around. So it's going to, kind of present a much better economic prospect for people in the South. And of course, when other refineries come out, they will solve those regional areas. At that particular instant, and over time we can then look at the more macro effect on the country. So I think it's important, and also I think away from what we can measure, the tangible benefits, let's look at the psychological benefits. It is important that this government restore confidence of Nigerians in Nigeria, the project Nigeria. I mean, when you look at the jackpot data, it's alarming. It's alarming.
It's alarming.
You're going to different hospitals and they're closing several units
because the doctors are not on ground.
They're not there.
They're running away.
You're also looking at the banking sector. They're vanishing. So I think the most important thing is for the government to, in everything, in their body language, let's restore the confidence of Nigerians in Nigeria. You go on a TV show, you go on a radio show, and people are giving maybe feedback, and they're saying, well, we hear you, we're inclined based on what you're saying to believe it, but the government has beaten us so many times. And then you have to remind them, well, this is a different government, let's just try, let's keep hope alive. But I think the government needs to change that narrative. It's for no fault of theirs. I mean, this current government, it's been there, but whatever they do, they need to meet up that start date. The other thing I want to add is this. In meeting up that start date, let's make sure that we are operating that refinery within the safe operating envelope. The reason I say so, if there's a certain volume required to run it safely without vibrations and without, of course, the possibility of a breakdown sooner, and we then deviate from that by operating below that particular operating envelope, just so that Nigerians can be happy, we risk resetting the clock on ourselves.
Oh my.
And that's the conversation we need to have. Look, solving economic problems is not difficult. It doesn't take Adam Smith theory. It just means that we need to have this conscious effort and be honest and have an honest conversation on ourselves. That's what it means. So I think that's what the government needs to do. Honest conversation, because the moment you start trying to have conversations that are more cosmetic about the truth, you're not solving the problem.
And one aspect you also want to add to what you're talking about is taking politics away from this.
Absolutely. That's the most fundamental thing. As I said, I said earlier, the experts that are supposed to advise the ministers need to be Nigerians first, patriotic Nigerians. There are so many loopholes that I sit here and I see, and we could couch that in the best technical English and make money. But the question is, what sort of future do you leave, for your children in a country like this? We need to start having honest conversations, and that's what will make a difference.
I really like that part. We've just talked about the advantages in your analysis, what we stand to gain if we have the Port Harcourt refinery operational in December. As much as I hate to say it, not the prophet of doom, what will we be facing if the Port Harcourt refinery is not functional by this December as promised?
Okay. Based on what we have, I think what we've been told, the NNPC said they have enough volumes to take off.
Well, we've heard a lot of that, many times.
But we don't know at what price we'll be buying it, right? Because we know a lot of the scarcity is very much, what's the word again? A lot of the scarcity is more like it's designed. It's not real. It's,
the artificial.
Artificial, of course.
Okay.
And then we have that happened. The next thing is this. union.
Okay, I want to crave your indulgence. First off, let me let you know, the listener, that you are watching Talking Point on Advocate Broadcasting Network, channel 140 on Star Times and channel 22 on Strong Decoder. You'll see our social media platforms on your screen. Do well to follow us across these platforms. Let's observe a short break. When we return, as much as I hate to say this part right there, we need to look at what we're going to be facing if the refinery is not operational by December. This is Talking Point. Please do stay tuned.
Carbon footprint follows environmental issues, from pollution to waste disposal, climate change to global warming, greenhouse effects, and more. Emission varies depending on individuals, location, habits, and personal choices. Get the hang of it on carbon footprints. Join me, Awe Ruswogene Ebo, on the program every Saturday at 11 a.m. as we run through the consequences of your actions and inactions on the environment. Carbon footprint.
So, you want to catch more of the glitz, the glam, the latest fashion, the cuisines, the rich culture from weddings, shows, parties, conferences, masterclasses, workshops, awards, festivals, and much more within and outside the Niger Delta? Join Tilly and UM on Event 360 every Saturday by 5 p.m. and a repeat broadcast on Sunday by 3 p.m. And let us take you on a journey on the trends and happenings in the event business within and outside the Niger Delta. For coverage or sponsorship, please call 070-367-07787. Events 360.
In a world of overwhelming voices where everyone has different opinion on different issues, it is important that we bring the core issue to the fore. Join me, Nancy Banigo, on Softline as we lend our voices to inform and influence your thoughts and actions. This is not just mere talk, it is an invocative program that touches the core of our existence.
Welcome back to Talking Point there. After the break, we need to continue from where we stopped. Before the break, we did talk about what we're going to be facing if we do not have the Port Harcourt Refinery functional this December as promised by His Excellency the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Well, I have an oil and gas expert and engineer as well, very, very entrenched in the business, and he has given several explanations. He's also laid out the map on how these things can be achieved. He's talked about the advantage as well if we have the December deadline met. Now, the other side of the conversation is, if we don't, what will we be looking at? Dr. Wisdom, Enang, I come to you. I asked that question before the break.
Correct.
Are we going to be seeing something more darker than what we're experiencing if we do not have the Port Harcourt Refinery operational this December?
Okay, so first off, I think the first thing we're going to find is union are going to kick in, because they've sent several warnings that, we better meet this deadline that you promised. Remember, there were several, requests from union as a means to sort of cushion the effect of the fuel subsidy removal. So what we should expect is this. I mean, when the festive period, the NNPC are saying they do have enough supply.
Well, they've given that promise over time, and somewhere along the line, we just have some form of artificial scarcity.
Correct. But what we should, that was the second component I was going to say. But Nigerians, no matter the assurances that have been given, based on historical data, if we don't have some sort of extra volumes from those ends, we need to sort of brace ourselves for price increase, right? We may be able to.
So it might even go beyond 700 that
Correct.
we're buying here.
It might go beyond, because the reason is this, right? You need to understand that the FX market, historically, based on festive demand, would have some sort of sporadic activity. So the certain months that you expect sporadic activities. The festive period is one, the back to school period is another one. So it's normal. We've been tracking this for years now, and we know that December is one where we would get that spike. And of course, December is actually where people begin to source money for holidays and then for back to school in January again. So that's a double effect there. So what does that mean? When the FX rate goes up in the black markets, if that's where this is being sourced, and NNPC, of course, perhaps are not able to supply that volume that we need. Perhaps they had done their entire design during that period, banking on the extra volumes that wouldn't come, based on what you've said. Then we will be having a situation where, there's scarcity of some form, and then there's a price increase. And then, of course, union will kick in, and then, of course, we'll start this this conversation about, okay, calm down from I'm talking from the federal government. So it's not a situation we want to do. We already have enough hardships. We already have enough cost push inflation factors that are worrying in. I mean, on ordinary Nigerians, and you couldn't take 10,000 to the market and buy something reasonable to last your family a couple of days. So I would beg on the federal government that it is time to restore that hope to Nigerians. The president came on the mandate of a renewed hope. I think it's time to put that, to action, to walk the talk, because Nigerians do not need, several meetings and, and also, flogging the issue. We need someone who has the conscience. This is where we need, leadership with conscience.
Patriotism.
Without patriotism, to come on and say, this is the truth, this is the direction. He may not know it all. The thing is, a lot of things are revealed to you as you go down the problem lane, but at least let's start with the truth. That forms the basis and the foundation upon which we then act and take those, kind of evaluation forward. But if we don't start with the truth, then we're already designed for failure ab initio. That's the problem.
Really, we pray we don't get to that point. But I'd like to also ask, where does Dangote Refinery stand in all of this? Because from what we know, it looks as though Dangote Refinery is ready. So where does it stand in all of this? Can't we fall back to Dangote Refinery?
Okay, so first off, let me tell people where we are in terms of Dangote Refinery and the national interests. The NNPC had bought a 20% stake in the Dangote Refinery. And let me explain to people how that stake works. The stake simply is an attempt to say, well, what is the minimum we can buy to allow us to be part of that board decisions that you make? Because if you're that big, and you're going to make decisions that perhaps will tilt the balance in the country, we need to have someone in the boardroom, at least to hear.
To represent our
interests. That's what it is. No way does that change the business fundamentals that Dangote had built on to be able to set up that business. And if that business fundamentals is profitability, I'll tell you what will happen. You give him some volumes, maybe at the right price, but perhaps not reflecting the right profit he wants to make. He'll do it and send it back. But he'll still maintain enough capacity to source crude from elsewhere, refine and send it to a jurisdiction where he can make more money, like Ghana.
Oh, really?
Look, you cannot control. Dangote had already set up the business structure before NNPC came in with 20%. Is 20% enough to tilt the balance of his, operational basis? It's not enough. 20% is not enough. So I want to disabuse Nigerian, the mind, the idea in Nigerians that Dangote Refinery is the answer. It's the answer if the right economic fundamentals, permits. But if we are saying for the sake of being a Nigerian, it's going to be given, and then perhaps he has to source it, his dollars to buy, the black market dollars to be able to buy, his crude from Nigeria, and then perhaps, he's then constrained to sell at a price that is lower than what he would have made in Ghana. He would do what, business people do. Take that product to where he's going to maximize profit. So it's a conditional statement. The Dangote Refinery, just to put it in a very comprehensive way, can solve the problem, part of the problem, of course, and then even help us begin to think about net export if the right economic fundamentals subsist.
Now I'm scared. 20%. That may not be enough to tip the scale. Well, anyway, let's conclude this conversation. What advice would you be giving the government at this juncture, and by extension Nigerians, as we prepare, hopefully, I say this word guidedly, hopefully for the kicking off of the Port Harcourt refineries at least?
Yeah, I think when I was, actively in the oil and gas sector as a technical personnel, we used to have what we call checklists. We do a checklist, and typically, the checklist is the last item. And that is us running through every single component that is required to start up that business, or to start up a project, or to commission a project, rather. The checklist is what the Nigerian government needs to be thinking about. Okay, so what does it contain? From a contractual standpoint, what are the components that we need to address? Have we addressed it? And do we have those imperatives in place? When we move on to the supply volumes themselves, do we have the right volumes? Do we need to be thinking about getting more domestic supply obligations, conversations around that? And, I think it's time to really test that the logical basis that we're thinking of in the domestic supply as it pertains to domestic supply obligations are still valid. The reason I say so is different to sign and say company A, you'll give us XYZ barrels every year as your domestic supply volumes. You need to go back to them and say, we're ready to start. Can you actually supply, or what volume can you supply in reality? And that's the conversation we want to be having. We want to be going through our checklist. Do we have the right minds coming? I mean, not every professional wants to come in and, displace people politically, because that shouldn't be the fear. Get the right minds there. Let's ask the right questions. When I was working technically, right, we used to have where we have risk assessment and risk identification, and the people that we didn't like most were the loss prevention team, because they come in and tell you the truth. It doesn't matter. They don't use emotions. No matter what how long you've been designing that thing, if it has a risk component, you either eliminate the risk or you reduce the severity of its impact to as low as reasonably possible. It's called ALAP. That is what the federal government needs to be doing. Have the right experts in the room. If there is risk along the checklist, let's eliminate the risk. We cannot always eliminate all the risk. Let's start having conversations around, if we cannot eliminate the risk, can we then be able to reduce the impact of that risk materializing to as low as reasonably possible?
Dr. Wisdom Enang has given, as they say, in some quarters, his 2 kobo to the conversation.
2 cents.
2 cents. I don't want to go with the cent. I'd rather go with the kobo, because that's what we use here.
That's
He's
right.
given his 2 kobo to the conversation, and I really must thank you.
Thank you.
These are very practical solutions that you put on the table.
Thank you.
If we just follow through what you've said, we may just be able to solve the problem that we've been immersed in for a very long time.
Absolutely.
Thank you again, Dr.
Thank
Wisdom.
you, sir.
It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We can only hope at this juncture that the federal government will get this information and act on it, because, as they say, some solutions are a low-hanging fruit. All you need to do is just reach out and grab it. And it's not rocket science, as some persons have said. This is the much we can take on the talking point today, talking about meeting the December deadline of the Port Harcourt refinery. If we have that met, first off, Nigerians will have their hope renewed. Second, confidence will be boosted. Third, most importantly, life will be much better than it is right now, which of course will take me to one of the fundamentals of government, which is the welfare and security of its people. We're hopeful that with all these things playing out, the administration will indeed renew our hope as we look forward to the December kickoff of the Port Harcourt Refinery. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. My name is Ike Chukwu Jiwe. We'll do it again next week. Until then, God bless Nigeria, and it's bye for now.
Let's talk security, current affairs, governance, politics, your view, elections, rule of law, economic issues, foreign events on the Talking Point. Talking Point, weekdays on this channel.